Hello and welcome to Harry's Moving Castle. This week I'm going to be talking about Robot Wars, specifically the series that has just finished. I loved Robot Wars as a kid, and I think after a while I lost interest, assuming that I just simply grew out of it, and as time went by I slowly forgot about its existence. When suddenly out of the blue the BBC decided to bring it back for a 6-episode miniseries, which when I first heard about this I was quite excited. Due to the prospect of newly made robots created in an age of technology that has advanced so far since the last series in 2004, I couldn't wait for it to start. But was the hype worth it? Does this new revamp match up to the legacy that the original series created? We shall soon find out. The series has vastly improved on its visuals since last on TV. The GoPros on parts of the arena such as the walls, the pit, and even underneath the floor flipper really update the series by getting in those areas that would have proven impossible to see at the turn of the millennium. The HD quality of the footage also makes the fights look incredible, especially when watching some of those slow motion shots that aren't just shots with lowered frame rates that they used in previous series. I really liked the music that was used in this series. Its electronic hard rock inspired soundtrack is familiar and yet updated for the modern times. It's strange, however, that there wasn't any music used in any of the battles, and were mainly used for the leaderboards and the team interviews. I always felt the music in the earlier series was fantastic in separating itself from sports and turning it into something more like a battle. Obviously music is not heard during real-world conflicts, but the distinction was what made the battles unique. Speaking of other things that were missing, where the fuck was Sergeant Bash? Could they seriously not have upgraded him for this series? I mean, I have no objection to the removal of Refbot, but Bash was there from day one, man. And now he's gone. It's also a shame this series didn't come up with any other fighting challenges aside from head-to-heads, 3 robot and 4 robot fights. Why not put a group of 2 or 3 robots against a house robot or 2? What about a new and deadly gauntlet? If they were able to do it in 98, why not now? The Mayhem and Annihilator setup they had in the Extreme series I also found quite entertaining. Beat 2 robots and you get to be part of a 6-robot free-for-all, 1 round at a time until there's only 1 left. The ultimate endurance challenge. I personally believe the amount of time they spent on making videos interviewing the teams could have been spent on more fights. This lack of diversity in destruction, I feel, comes from the structure of the tournament itself. The scoring system would have been better if half the robots in the episodes weren't wiped out in the first rounds. This puts so much attention on the robots that might not necessarily have done that much in the first round and continue to do so in the head-to-heads. One example that springs to mind is Foxic. This problem could have been solved had they just used the original Eliminator style of competition throughout the entirety of the series, raising the stakes for each fight. They used a scoring type system in the first and second series for gauntlets and other challenges, not fights, which worked because it was used for the first 2 rounds only, eliminating robots one by one. Because the later series had huge Eliminator tournaments that focused solely on fighting, the Eliminator was the better method of contest. This scoring system for the head-to-heads just seems a little bit pointless and boring because it just stretches out battles between robots that had already previously fought each other. For example, Beast failed to impress much in its first bout, but also consecutively in the head-to-heads, creating boring fights because of this new tournament format. My 2 favourite robots of this series definitely have to be the grand finalists. Apollo and Carbide were, in my opinion, 2 of the best robots of the series. They were both very impressive robots, and I'm happy that both made it to the final. Carbide gave Hypnodisc a run for their money, and I really liked that they were in it for no other reason than being the most destructive robot on the show. Apollo had great sportsmanship too, the boy band of Robot Wars as they were called, serving to be the most entertaining robot and team with their personalities and the flipping of house robots. What's even better is that both were new to the series. I saw so many of the old robots put to shame by the new robots that came along this year, which I was thoroughly impressed with. It was a little unfortunate, however, that the golden oldies were treated like newbies. I know it's been 12 years since Robot Wars was on TV, and that not everybody's memories of it aren't going to be as good as mine, but there seems to be little to no acknowledgement of the achievements that the previous competitors held prior to this series. In the first episode, they do acknowledge this with regards to Razor.
We're dealing with a bit of a legend here.
Yeah, Razor, cool. Built back in 98.
And Jonathan Pierce's first comment being back on the show.
It is so good to be back.
But after that, it seems that the previous robots of the series are treated like they've never been on the show before. Specifically Thermidor, Terahertz, King Bee, Damn Tom Kier, and Bigger Brother. Well, I should really call it Aughty, shouldn't I? But let's face it, it really was Bigger Brother 2. It even becomes apparent later in the show that Professor Noel Sharkey's memory is receding as well when he is gobsmacked by things he's already seen on the show.
But flipping 2 bots like that, never seen anything like that before.
The champions want to beat everyone, taking on Shunt and flipping Shunt over.
Even if the last judge from the original series remaining is getting a bit old, the technology certainly isn't. It was quite a nice surprise to see those little segments where one of the judges discusses the latest advances in robotics each week, giving the show that little bit more professionalism which I really appreciate. They're always interesting and is quite a nice substitute for the lack of technological advancements made in the robots themselves. One thing that Professor Sharkey did correctly point out, however, is that the robots this year haven't really been that technologically innovative. They certainly are more powerful in terms of engineering, but when I watched the show as a kid, I saw the robots go from boxes on wheels to the most destructive pieces of machinery over the course of 6 years. 12 years on and the robots haven't really changed that much in design, and I wonder how many restrictions there were on the designs of the robots in the interest of health and safety. A fight had to be stopped due to a robot ripping parts of the arena apart, but a similar situation happened in the grand final of Series 7. This is probably why guns and other ranged weaponry, aside from flamethrowers, are never seen, but I honestly would have thought more innovative weaponry could have been designed in order to make the biggest and baddest robots this year, but sadly the show's grand finalists were simply flippers and spinners. Now this is somewhat contradictory because both were very impressive robots. I am just simply critiquing the designs of the robots in general. PP3D was one exception to this, in that it was designed and built with parts that could be made from a 3D printer. It was pretty impressive in power, but its design was pretty flawed compared to a spinner like Carbide. One of the biggest complaints I have about Series 8 is the sheer lack of enthusiasm for destruction amongst the Roboteers. In fact, Carbide were the only team that seemed to have any intent on absolutely obliterating everyone else. Other teams were often too concerned with the amount of money that went into building it instead of actually using it to destroy the living daylights out of everybody else. I honestly can't remember there being any mention of the value of robots in the earlier series. Storm 2 cost £20,000 to build, so what? If your money meant so much to you, why did you bother taking the risk and bringing it on Robot Wars? Just because you spent a wad of cash on a metal box on wheels doesn't mean you are any more deserving of winning the contest. Of course robots are expensive to build, but that's the risk you run with going on the show. This is why it was such an unpopular decision to award money to the winner of Series 7, because the show was never about money. In fact, I would hazard a guess that the showrunners wanted to minimize the destruction as much as possible. In the fights, if a robot is immobilized, that is the end of the fight. I remember countless robots placed on flippers and disposed of by house robots back in the day because they were finished but the fight wasn't. The lowering of the stakes means that there's less competition and creates more boring fights. Further evidence of people not wanting their robots destroyed can be seen in the following clips.
No. There are far worse ways for a robot to fail than leaving the arena.
There's got to be something.
Left it whole and not in a bin bag.
Okay, fine. Okay, grand.
They want to be the good guys of Robot Wars, not the bad guys.
Leave it. I don't want to damage his robot anymore.
If Thor gets totally destroyed, I will be heartbroken. 300 hours of work and a lot of money smashed to pieces. Upsetting.
I mean, what a rampage! They loved it. They want you to go in hard, and that's exactly what you did. Somebody who were at the wrong end of your rampage. Well done.
Sorry, guys.
I think it's game over for this series.
Team Chompalot's decision to withdraw from the competition.
To really top this complaint off, look no further than the dramatic team interviews. Don't get me wrong, most of them are pretty cool. It's interesting that they're putting more focus on the individuals who made the robots instead of the robots themselves by interviewing them in other places aside from the pits. I'm not really sure that it is a wise move considering the title of the show is Robot Wars, but some of these clips are just outright bizarre. I mean, did anybody else feel a little bit creeped out by that weird surgery interview with the team captain of Mr. Speed Squared?
The doctor will see you now. Well, my job, which involves surgery at work, obviously is precise and controlled, so robots allow a different kind of surgery to take place, which is a lot less precise and much less controlled and perhaps a bit more fun. It's okay, you won't feel a thing.
It's a shame Craig Charles wasn't the host of this year's series, but Dara O'Brien and Angela Scanlon were perfect replacements in my opinion. I'm really happy that they both went into the pits for interviews and watched the fights, meaning that they share the work, so to speak. Both were funny and definitely tried to keep the spirit of the show positive and optimistic. Jonathan Pierce was also brilliant as the commentator as always. I love how bloody enthusiastic he gets. It's just wonderful hearing his voice again outside of football, and I'm really happy that he decided to return. Despite all my grumbling, I would definitely watch another series of this if they were to make one. The final episode with all the strongest robots was truly spectacular, making me wish for a 22 episode series with a full eliminator tournament, or even another Extreme series. That would be amazing. So then, we are posed with the question for Robot Wars 2016, did it suck? Not entirely. I think the show's gone back to its roots a bit, which is okay, but the show really does have a reputation to live up to now, especially with shows like BattleBots as strong competition across the waters. I think the mistakes this series made probably could have been avoided, but after 12 years of no Robot Wars and me nearly forgetting all about it, it was nice to see it on TV again, and I'm going to be a very happy man if they make another series.